It's Poet the Poet. I'm Robert Dunn, and if you're not a fan of this series by now, you will be in the next 30 minutes because we have a couple of wild ones here. We have Stephen Hartman over here, and we have David Huberman over there, and as the old routine has it, there are a couple of wild and crazy guys, as a matter of fact, and it should be very fascinating to hear what they have to say. We're in the Orange Bear today, just off City Hall on Murray Street, and we're grateful to Victor for letting us come in and make public spectacles of ourselves. Matter of fact, we're all wearing spectacles, now that I think about it. And please don't forget our magazine, Medicinal Purposes, which is put out by Poet the Poet. We're proud of all kinds of things, and we're especially proud to have our guests. We'll start with Stephen Hartman, who was born in Storm Lake, Iowa, during a storm.
About a town of 8,000 people.
Let's see. The Army brought him to New York.
Right, and I got lucky. I was stationed at Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn, during the Vietnam War. Not a bad place to be.
Yes. Well, was this before or after they built the bridge?
Before.
Okay, let's see. Then you spent 30 years after that in New York?
I stayed in New York after I got out of the service. I really felt like New York was the place that I should be.
Iowa just didn't have the call anymore, did it?
No, it didn't.
Not even Storm Lake?
No, especially Storm Lake.
By the way, how do you pronounce the state capital?
Des Moines.
Des Moines, okay.
But we have a problem with pronunciation in Iowa, and my wife is constantly correcting about every word that I say. We have a real problem. Well, we call...
Including
I grew up in a county called Buena Vista, and everybody there referred to it as Buena Vista. And if we heard anybody referring to it as Buena Vista, we knew they were from out of town. Probably from New York.
A shibboleth, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, and you have a BA in English from Long Island University?
Right, in English.
In Brooklyn, I would think.
Yes.
Or the Long Island campus?
In the Brooklyn campus.
Let's see. And also an MBA in accounting.
Yes, after I graduated with my English degree, I was surprised I couldn't get, a lucrative job in the publishing industry, and I was a proofreader instead. So I spent the next 5 years going back to school at night, studying accounting of all things.
Is that how you account for your poems?
Absolutely. It's where I really attribute accounting to how I learned how to write poetry, because before that I was very undisciplined, and I couldn't sit still for 8 hours. But when I started doing those accounting problems for homework, it took 16 hours to do a problem, and I would sit in my basement, and I learned how to sit still for the first time in my life. So when I started writing poetry, that discipline really came in handy. So I found that you could use one discipline to help you in another one.
Let that be a lesson to you, David. Acting isn't everything.
That's right. That's right.
How about a poem? Let's get into it then.
This is a poem that I wrote, and it's about coming back to New York. I had left for about a year and a half, and I went down to the University of South Carolina, and then I came back to New York. And I lived on the Lower East Side for about 3 months, and this is the things that happened to me while living there. Why do I look like Mr. Rogers when I feel like Lou Reed? I wanted to be cool, drop out of society into the Lower East Side, a society of transvestite perverts and psychotic wino bums. But they would not admit me to their underground velvet bars and pleasure-domed discos. A Hell's Angel with a swastika carved on his left cheek asked me for a quarter, but I only had a token, so he threatened me with death. A drug addict put a screwdriver to my neck. Anonymous hands threw bricks at me because I wore a three-piece suit. I looked like Mr. Rogers, but I felt like Lou Reed singing Satellite of Love to 3,000 nymphomaniacs. I wanted to look like Rambo, James Dean, a criminal. I wanted to wear black leather, but was denied admission to the Pyramid Club. When a dehydrated wino on St. Mark's Place told me to go live among the Jews in Borough Park, I left the Lower East Side with few regrets, thinking I could get a circumcision, learn a few words of Yiddish, and become a member of an Orthodox religious sect. But the Jews refused me admission to the synagogue, so I joined the Club of Being and Nothingness with John Paul Sartre, president, and appointed myself secretary treasurer.
Because of your accounting experience, I think.
Absolutely.
It sounds like the typical open. Let's see. This is in a book, I see.
Yes, this was
What is the book called?
It's called Pinched Nerves. It was published by Cross Cultural Communications about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Time really moves quickly.
Stanley Barkin strikes again.
Right.
Hi, Stan. How you doing?
Very good editor.
Yes.
In fact, Stanley Barkin was the person that got me to read my first poem. I was really afraid of being in front of audiences all my life, and Stanley Barkin, the editor of Cross Cultural, every time I'd go to one of his poetry readings, he would ask me to read a poem, and I would always refuse, and finally he invited me to be one of the featured readers. And so that day I spent doing yoga, getting calmed down, and in preparation, and I read a very short poem, and I was surprised. People actually were very supportive. So I read another one, and the following day I went to an open reading, and I was like addicted to poetry readings at that point. I couldn't get enough of them.
Aren't we all? Is this you?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to be clear on that. Well, instead of doing a long yoga to do a short poem, how about a quick yoga and another poem?
Okay. My mother, back in Iowa, she would always try to get me jobs during the summer. It was very important, she thought, for me to work. And this was one of the last jobs that she got me before I got out of Iowa, the hospital orderly. I wore a green uniform and got paid minimum wage to empty bedpans, push stroke victims curled like commas in wheelchairs to a solarium, push pink pills into gaping mouths of comatose men, and on the graveyard shift, when no one was looking, peeked at photographs in medical textbooks of burn victims, and was hypnotized by a pair of gonads swollen larger than basketballs from a rare tropical disease. I was paid to clean rubber glove fingerprints of blood and carbon copies of dead bodies off a stainless steel table, then carry a green plastic trash bag full of broken bones, colons, and intestines to an incinerator with a tall smokestack that spewed something the nurses called black snow.
Really?
That's a rather dark poem, but they would always have a habit at the hospital to, whenever they needed someone to help out in the autopsy room, it inevitably was right when you were having your dinner. It's the kind of things that happen only in hospitals.
I thought this is what they do for fun in Iowa. Well, we're going to get letters about that, I suppose. But, all right, do you have a poem about what you do for fun, or what other interesting things we have in there?
A couple of years ago, I kind of got into the habit of going to work just a little bit early. And so I'd get to the company cafeteria about 30 minutes before work started, and I would sit down and I would try to write impressions of people that I had worked with over the years. And I was working at a company that really had some characters, and that really helped my poetry. And I get lots of my poetry from work. I don't know what I would do if I didn't work.
How many jobs did it cost you?
None, surprisingly.
Oh, that's a relief. Okay.
These are really short little poems, and they were put together later in a little chapbook called Coffee Break Poems. Worker number 2. Pat, the secretary, who was brain damaged in an auto accident, lets the phone ring since she's not expecting any calls. And when she does take a message, it's the wrong number. Worker number 4. Ray, the sales rep and Boy Scout leader, believes the lives of his unmarried pregnant daughter and heavy metal teenage son will have a happy ending.
Have you ever worked with David?
I've heard some of his pieces about work, and I'm really glad that I don't work with him. I'd hate to be in any of his pieces.
Here we go.
Probably some of these people hate being in my pieces,
Don't worry,
too.
David. You can get even in the second half.
Yes, I will.
Worker number 5. Ruth, the dedicated office manager, approves petty cash vouchers as if the money comes from her own pocket. After 27 years, thinks she owns the company. Worker number 8. Dan, the hypochondriac cost accountant, believes in alternative medicine, swallows 200 supplemental vitamins with distilled water, measures his blood pressure and heartbeat, and administers enemas with black volcanic ash to scrub the inside lining of his stomach.
Woof.
Worker number 12. Betty Lou is the white trash teenage gal Friday who chews gum and polishes her nails a fire engine red to please her boyfriend who works somewhere in the sub-basement. I think that's all of those I'll read. I went on and on with these, and I had to stop doing it because...
Stephen, let me explain something to you. My office is supposed to be a secure area, and I want to know how you got in there.
Which one was you?
No, you didn't get to me yet. I was out sick that day. Thank God. Well, how about another poem?
Okay. I think I'll read something that I did a magazine called Make Room for Data about 5 years ago, and I co-edited it with Herschel Silverman and some other people from Naropa. And
Naropa?
Naropa Institute out in Colorado, Ginsberg School.
Ah, okay.
There was several students that helped us out there, and they got some really great poetry for our magazine. And they later, the whole class came to New York, and we had a big poetry reading down at St. Mark's Poetry Center, and it was really great. This was one of the poems that I got in there. They were a really tough bunch of people, and they rejected lots of my poetry as well as everybody else's.
Mine too.
But they had a high quality. And this is one that got in there, so I'm very proud of this one. Growing old in America. I was afraid of geritol loneliness and avoided my memory of a bald-headed, toothless man slumped on a bar stool with his fly open, unconscious of free fruitcake and drunk conversation. I was afraid of rheumatoid arthritis, varicose veins, psoriasis, until I discovered the fountain of eternal youth in a cosmetic counter at Macy's, found salesgirls who spray perfume into the air like rain, and salesmen with faces soft as salesgirls who begged me to buy peanut butter suntan oil with the odor of an orgy. I was afraid of growing old, false teeth, wrinkles, baldness in New York City, until I found that for only a few dollars, I can turn my white toilet tissue skin into rich chocolate, like a model sunbathing on the Riviera.
Peanut butter suntan oil?
Oh, yeah.
You know, David
That's good
does some very interesting things with peanut butter, too, but he'll talk about that in the second half of the show. You don't want to miss this. So what's in your future, Stephen? You're going to do pinched nerves, too? Or is there a cure?
No, I'm working on another manuscript, and nothing, small things. I had a little chapbook of those worker poems, and I really liked it. It was about 20 pages, nice and small things. That's where I'm at right now.
And when people come to you for advice on writing, what do you tell them?
Nobody ever comes to me for advice.
Oh, somebody must. Well, let's pretend I came to you for advice then.
I would say keep writing.
Well, I'll do that anyway.
Good.
No trade secrets?
None whatsoever. Hard work. 99% perspiration for me.
Okay. Maybe a little one, a haiku or something?
I have no little ones. How about?
All right. Let's.
Okay. This was written just recently, and I recently got married a couple of years ago. My wife and I took a honeymoon cruise. Thanks for the memories. Encouraged by Victor the Bingo Boy, we succumbed to cruise board fun. Frolic in the hot tub while humming the theme from the Titanic. Play ping pong with rich widows from Wichita, and applaud the sequined chorus as they tap a Morse code of Broadway melodies. Forced to dine with obnoxious bores and their tanned trophy wives, we try to make idle conversation and not panic at so many silver forks, but decide we'd rather eat raw oysters with the cook, uncork a bottle of cheap champagne, toast the harbor moonlight and the Spanish-speaking crew who pamper us like platypuses in a zoo.
The iceberg gets all the good lines. Thank you, Stephen Hartman, for coming on Poet to Poet and pinching a few nerves. And we will be back in a moment with David Huberman and his peanut butter stories. Don't go away.